The arena was alive with a frenetic energy, the kind of energy that felt more like a wave than a crowd. Thousands of spectators gathered, their cheers echoing off the rusted steel walls that surrounded the combatants. The air was thick with tension, a palpable buzz of anticipation that seemed to make the very ground beneath them vibrate. On the vast, crumbling floor of the arena, two figures stood facing each other, each preparing for a dance of death. Toran, the undefeated champion of Zyphra, stood in the center. His imposing figure loomed large, a hulking mass of muscle and arrogance. His armor, dark and sleek, gleamed under the harsh lights, as if mocking the very idea of vulnerability. He swung his enormous battle axe in slow, deliberate arcs, the sound of metal cutting through the air a menacing reminder of his raw strength. The crowd roared at his every movement. This was a spectacle. This was power. This was their champion. Across from him, standing silently, was Selene. The crowd fell into a tense silence as their eyes landed on her. She was small in comparison, barely a fraction of Toran's size, her frame lithe and sharp. She was dressed in a black combat suit that clung to her like a second skin, hiding nothing, revealing everything. Her long, jet-black hair was tied back tightly, and her eyes, cold and focused, scanned her opponent with an almost clinical precision. There were no weapons visible on her. No armor. Just her. In her mind. A hush fell over the crowd as the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for the ultimate showdown. The mighty Toran, undefeated and feared, versus the silent but deadly Selene. A fight for the ages, a fight that will decide who truly rules the combat rings of Zyphra. The announcer's voice faded as the noise of the crowd swelled once more. Selene didn't even flinch. She simply stared at Toran, unblinking. The confidence in his eyes was unmistakable. But she saw something else there too, something that reminded her of the warriors she had killed in the past. His arrogance was his weapon, just as much as his battle axe. Toran's voice cut through the noise. "You should have stayed in the shadows, assassin," he said, his tone mocking. "You've no business here, facing a true champion. But I'll end you quickly, so you can fade away like all the others." Selene didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes, something Toran wasn't used to. Most people quivered in fear at his presence, but not her. She met his taunt with nothing but calm eyes and the faintest hint of a smirk that only she knew the meaning of. "You think you can beat me?" Toran continued, stepping forward, his boots thundering on the cracked floor. "With no weapons, no armor? You've made your choice. A fatal one." Still, no answer came from Selene. Instead, she just shifted slightly on her feet, the barest movement. She knew better than to speak, words were pointless now. Only action mattered. Toran raised his battle axe, the crowd's cheers rising to a deafening crescendo. He was about to deliver the blow that would end this fight before it even began. "Here it comes, girl. Prepare to die," he taunted. "One blow. That's all it'll take." Selene didn't flinch. She didn't even look away. Her eyes remained locked on his, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, when Toran swung his massive axe down with the force of a collapsing star, she would be ready. The blow was inevitable. She knew that. But what Toran didn't understand was that her victory didn't lie in outmuscling him, it lay in outthinking him. Toran's axe descended, and the crowd gasped as it sliced the air with a terrifying whistle. But in that same instant, Selene moved. She didn't block the strike. She didn't try to dodge with a show of fancy footwork. Instead, she did something simpler. She leaned back, just enough to make the massive blade miss her by mere inches. The force of Toran's swing sent a gust of wind whipping past her, but Selene was already a step ahead. She moved closer, just a heartbeat away from the giant. Toran's eyes narrowed. "What's wrong, assassin? Too slow to even dodge?" His taunt dripped with derision. He raised his axe for another swing, thinking this would be it, thinking it would end her. But Selene only smiled. "I'll let you swing first," she said, her voice soft but clear enough for the whole arena to hear. "Then I'll show you why you're wrong." It was the smallest of gestures, but the effect was profound. Toran hesitated for the briefest of moments, his confidence faltering just slightly. In that split second, Selene saw something, an opening, a flaw in his arrogance. Toran's swing came again, this time faster, more forceful. But Selene was already moving. She darted to his side, just as fluid and silent as her reputation suggested. Her movements were a blur, calculated and efficient. The giant's next blow cut through nothing but empty air, and before he could correct his stance, Selene had already circled around behind him, almost invisible in her precision. With a swift, almost imperceptible motion, she struck. Her fist hit the weak point of his armor, a chink in the flawless metal that no one had seen before. Toran's expression shifted for just a moment, a flicker of surprise. Then came pain. He gritted his teeth, but Selene wasn't finished. She was never finished until the fight was hers. "One blow," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the sea of cheering and gasping spectators. "That's all it takes." Toran staggered, gasping for air as the crowd gasped in collective disbelief. The champion, the invincible Toran, had been wounded. Not by brute force. Not by some hidden weapon. But by the mind of a woman who knew exactly when to wait, and when to strike. The arena was a storm of noise, but in Selene's mind, it was silent. She could hear only the rhythm of her breath, steady and controlled. The crowd's roars, Toran's taunts, the clang of his axe as it cut through the air, all of it faded to the background as she focused. This was a dance of death, and she was the one in control of the steps. Toran's eyes blazed with fury. "You think you can dodge me, assassin?" he shouted, his voice thick with contempt. "I've crushed warriors like you before. You're nothing but a fleeting shadow." Selene didn't answer. She didn't need to. Words were empty. In her world, action was the only language that mattered. She could feel the tension building in Toran's posture, his muscles coiling in preparation for the next blow. She could see the desperation beginning to seep into his movements. He was losing his grip on the fight, and that was exactly what she needed. The battle began again with a deafening roar from the crowd as Toran charged forward, his massive battle axe raised high, its blade gleaming under the arena lights. The weapon was an extension of his own arrogance, an object that had become synonymous with his image as the galaxy's deadliest champion. To most, it was a symbol of his invincibility. To Selene, it was a tool of his undoing. With a fluid motion, she sidestepped to the right, her body moving like a shadow in the night. Toran's axe sliced through the air where she had just been, its weight and force enough to shake the ground beneath them. The crowd gasped in collective disbelief. "Is that all?" she muttered under her breath, her voice cool and even. Toran gritted his teeth and snarled in frustration. He spun, bringing the axe back around for another strike. This time, he aimed lower, targeting her legs, thinking to disable her and end the fight in one swift blow. But again, Selene anticipated his move. She darted back, just out of reach, her movements sharp and precise. The tip of his axe skimmed the dust on the floor where she had stood, missing her by mere inches. "You think you're clever?" Toran spat, his voice thick with irritation. "I'll break you. It's only a matter of time before your tricks run out." Selene didn't answer. She didn't need to. His words were meaningless now. The fight had shifted. He was no longer in control. She had taken that power from him with every dodge, every calculated step. Her silence was her strength. It was driving him mad, making him swing harder, faster, more recklessly. Each attack grew more predictable, each movement more desperate. The cracks in his invincible exterior were widening, and Selene would exploit them. The crowd was caught between awe and confusion. They had never seen anything like this. Toran, the undefeated champion, was being outclassed by someone smaller, faster, and, most importantly, smarter. But the more Toran floundered, the more his reputation worked against him. The expectations were too high. The weight of his own ego was dragging him down, and Selene could see it. Toran let out a frustrated roar and lunged at her again, his battle axe raised high. This time, he was unhinged, his eyes wild with anger. He swung with all his might, determined to end it with a single, devastating blow. Selene didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She had studied him, watched him, and now she knew exactly how to break him. As the axe came crashing down toward her, she ducked low, just out of range, and at the same time, her foot swept forward, tripping him. Toran's face twisted in surprise as he staggered forward, the momentum of his swing sending him off balance. The crowd let out a collective gasp as the mighty champion stumbled. It was the moment she'd been waiting for. Before he could recover, Selene was already moving in. Her strike was swift, precise, aimed at the vulnerable point in his side where his armor was weakest. She had studied his movements, his posture, and now she knew how to strike. Her fist connected with the chink in his armor, the force of her punch driving into the soft flesh beneath. Toran's breath hitched as the air left his lungs. The blow was nothing extraordinary in terms of strength, but its placement was perfect. For the first time, Selene saw something in his eyes, something unfamiliar. It wasn't anger. It wasn't arrogance. It was pain. "Damn you," Toran gasped, stumbling back. His hand went to his side, and when it came away, it was slick with blood. His chest heaved with effort as he tried to steady himself, but the damage was done. The champion was no longer untouchable. Selene took a step back, her gaze never leaving him. "One blow," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "That's all it takes." Toran's eyes burned with fury, but there was something else in them now, fear. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Selene caught it. He had underestimated her. He had thought her a mere shadow, a fleeting figure who would crumble under the weight of his strength. But now, he saw that she was more than that. She was his equal in every way. "Don't think this is over," Toran spat, his voice a low growl. He raised his axe again, his grip shaky but determined. The arrogance was still there, but it was thin, fragile, cracking under the pressure. "I'll crush you." But Selene wasn't listening. She had already moved again, her body a blur of motion, quicker than he could track. She didn't need to hear his threats. She knew what was coming next, and so did he. As Toran swung wildly at her once more, Selene simply stepped aside, letting him miss once again. This time, she didn't wait. She was already on the move, closing the distance between them faster than he could react. She struck again, her fist connecting with the weak spot on his armor. The blow landed with precision, and Toran's knees buckled. He collapsed to the ground, his battle axe falling from his grip as he struggled to catch his breath. The crowd was silent now, watching the champion fall. Toran's arrogance had been shattered. His pride was broken. And now, Selene stood over him, the fight hers to win. The silence was deafening, and in that moment, the arena held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The arena was now deathly silent. The echoes of the crowd's fervent cheering had disappeared into the background, replaced by the heavy, labored breathing of the two combatants. Toran, the galaxy's most feared champion, was on his knees, gasping for breath, his once mighty body crumpled in defeat. His battle axe lay discarded on the ground, as though it had abandoned him in his hour of need. Selene stood a few paces away, still poised, still calm, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The adrenaline that had coursed through her moments earlier was now replaced with a strange calmness. This was the moment she had worked for, the moment where she proved to herself, and the galaxy, that she was more than just an assassin. She was a force to be reckoned with. The crowd, unsure whether to cheer or remain silent in disbelief, watched as Selene's gaze fixed on Toran, her eyes sharp and calculating. He was wounded. He was vulnerable. And now, the moment had come to finish it. Toran's hand trembled as he pushed himself up, his pride demanding that he stand, even if his body had betrayed him. He glared at Selene, his expression a mix of hatred and grudging respect. The arrogance that had once defined him was now a mere shadow of its former self, replaced by something darker. His eyes were clouded with fury, yet there was a flicker of doubt, something Selene had never seen in his gaze before. "Is that it?" Toran's voice was rough, strained. He spat blood on the floor as he spoke. "You think this makes you better than me?" Selene didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could. He stood shakily, his legs unsteady beneath him, and for a brief moment, he seemed to waver, uncertain. The mighty champion had been brought to his knees by a woman half his size, a woman he had once dismissed as unworthy of his time. Now, in the harsh light of reality, he realized how wrong he had been. "You were wrong to underestimate me," Selene said, her voice cold, devoid of emotion. "I'm not here to fight for your approval, Toran. I'm here to prove something, to myself." Toran sneered, but it was weak, the fire in his eyes flickering. "Prove it, then. Show me what you're really made of." He was taunting her again, but Selene could see through it. This was no longer a fight of strength. This was a fight for pride, for who would walk away from this arena with their dignity intact. Toran's pride was all he had left, and he was determined to hold on to it. Selene wasn't fooled by his bravado. She had seen this before, fighters who clung to their egos long after their bodies had failed them. And she knew how to break them. Without warning, she lunged forward. Toran raised his arms, trying to guard himself, but it was too late. Her movements were a blur of speed and precision, too fast for his tired muscles to keep up with. She struck at his exposed side, landing a powerful blow to his ribs. Toran grunted, the sound of his breath coming in sharp gasps as the impact forced the air from his lungs. He staggered back, his body swaying as if it might collapse at any moment. He tried to swing at her, but his movements were sluggish, his reactions delayed. Selene was already gone, moving with an agility that only years of training and discipline could have honed. "Why won't you fall?" Toran growled, frustration creeping into his voice. Selene didn't respond. Instead, she simply moved again, faster this time. Toran had no chance to block her, and her fist connected with the side of his head, sending him reeling. His vision blurred, his head spinning, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse right there. But his pride wouldn't let him. He stumbled, trying to right himself, and swung wildly in an attempt to catch Selene off guard. But his strike was too wide, too predictable. Selene ducked, rolling beneath his grasp, and came up behind him. The crowd was silent now, captivated by the spectacle of the once unstoppable champion being dismantled piece by piece. "You still don't understand," Selene said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "This isn't about winning, Toran. It's about surviving. About finding a way to keep going when everything else falls apart." Her words hit him harder than any physical blow. He had never been challenged like this before, not in battle, not in life. His identity had always been tied to his strength, to his dominance in the arena. But now, in the face of Selene's relentless precision and control, he was realizing the truth: strength alone wasn't enough. Toran turned again, desperate now. His movements were no longer tactical, no longer the calculated strikes of a trained warrior. They were the flailing attempts of a man who could see his world crumbling around him, and he was fighting to hold on to it by sheer force of will. Selene, however, saw through it all. She didn't need to defeat him through strength, she only needed to outlast him, to outthink him. She knew Toran better than he knew himself now. He had shown all his weaknesses, and she was going to exploit them. One last time. With a single, graceful motion, Selene moved in close. Toran swung once more, but this time, Selene anticipated the movement, ducking under the strike and grabbing his arm. She twisted it, pulling him off balance, and with one quick, decisive motion, she swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground with a thud, the air forced from his lungs as his body slammed against the cold floor of the arena. The crowd's stunned silence stretched on, as if the universe itself had paused to witness this moment. Toran lay there, gasping for breath, his pride shattered, his body broken. He was no longer the apex predator. He was just a man, vulnerable and defeated. Selene stood over him, her gaze unwavering. The fight was over. And she had won. Toran looked up at her, his eyes wild with disbelief and something deeper, something darker. "Finish it," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "End it. Prove you're the better fighter." But Selene didn't need to prove anything anymore. She had already won. She had already proven that it wasn't strength or pride that made a champion. It was the ability to endure, to adapt, and to survive. Instead of striking the final blow, she turned away from him. The fight was over. And Toran was left lying on the cold, unforgiving floor, a man broken not by the force of a weapon, but by the quiet, unyielding strength of someone who had never given up.